August 1943. The heat rises in shimmering waves off the hard-packed earth of the Texas plains. A single rider breaks the silence, galloping through the mesquite with the desperate energy of a man chasing the horizon. To a distant observer, he is indistinguishable from any other ranch hand in the county, lean, sun-bronzed, moving in perfect rhythm with the animal beneath him. But as the camera pushes in, the illusion fractures. He is not wearing denim. He is clad in the faded, sand-coloured tropical tunic of the German Afrika Korps. This man is an enemy combatant, a soldier of the Third Reich, thousands of miles from the front lines. Yet here, there are no guards, no rifles trained on his back, only the thunder of hooves and the terrifying freedom of the open range. He rides until the fences are mere lines in the dust, tempted by the vastness, before a heavy realization pulls on the reins. He is a prisoner of war, and it is time to return to the cage. May 1943. The war in North Africa ends not with a final glorious charge, but with a massive, choking cloud of dust rising over the Tunisian coast. General Jürgen von Arnim, the successor to the Desert Fox himself, Erwin Rommel, surrenders the remnants of the Army Group Africa. In a matter of days, the Allies are faced with a staggering reality that their strategic planners had not fully anticipated. They have not just won a battle, they have inherited an army. Over 250,000 Axis soldiers, hardened veterans of the Desert War, the elite of the Wehrmacht, are now prisoners of war. For Winston Churchill and the British High Command, this victory presents an immediate logistical nightmare. Great Britain is an island fortress under siege, rationing every ounce of bread and meat. The infrastructure is battered by the Blitz, and the supply lines are stretched to the breaking point. There is simply no way to feed, house and guard 250,000 German men on British soil without compromising the war effort. The solution lies across the Atlantic. The United States, the arsenal of democracy, has the space, the food, and the isolation required to contain this massive influx of humanity. The transport begins immediately. The Liberty ships, the workhorses of the Allied supply chain, arrive in North African ports laden with tanks, ammunition, and rations for the push toward Italy. Usually, they return to the United States empty, riding high and unstable in the water. Now they are filled with living cargo. Thousands of German soldiers are marched up the gangplanks, leaving the burning wreckage of their vehicles behind. For many of these men, the journey is a terrified waiting game. Locked in the holds of enemy ships, they navigate waters infested by their own comrades, the U-boat wolf packs. The irony is not lost on them. A torpedo from a German submarine is the greatest threat to their lives. They spend weeks in the humid, steel bellies of the ships, expecting death at any moment. But death does not come. Instead, they arrive at a revelation that will shatter their worldview more effectively than any artillery barrage. The ships dock in New York, Boston, and Norfolk. The prisoners are brought up on deck, blinking in the sunlight, and they are greeted by a sight that defies the propaganda of Joseph Goebbels. They were told that America was a decaying nation, crippled by Jewish influence, its cities in ruins, its people starving. Instead, they see the New York skyline, intact and defiant. They see harbors choking with new warships. As night falls, they see something that has been extinct in Europe for years: light. There are no blackouts here. The cities glow with an industrial vitality that signals a terrifying truth to the German soldiers. They have awakened a giant that is not only awake, but operating at a capacity the Third Reich cannot hope to match. From the ports, they are loaded onto trains, and here the psychological dislocation deepens. They are not thrown into cattle cars. Many are transported in Pullman coaches with upholstered seats. They are given box lunches containing white bread, meat and fruit, luxuries that had vanished from their tables back home. The trains head west, rolling for days without reaching a border. The scale of the American continent begins to sink in. They watch through the windows as the landscape shifts from the industrial east to the endless green of the Midwest, and finally to the harsh, sprawling beauty of the Southwest. They are heading to Texas. The state has been designated as the primary holding ground for the Afrika Korps. The climate is dry and hot, similar to the North African desert they just left, minimizing the acclimatization period. The isolation is absolute. There is nowhere to run. As the trains rattle over the tracks into the Texas Panhandle, the prisoners stare out at a horizon that seems to go on forever. They are thousands of miles from the fatherland, deep in the heart of an enemy territory that looks nothing like a war zone. They are about to enter a bizarre twilight existence, a golden cage built of barbed wire and abundance. By late 1943, the state of Texas has transformed into a vast archipelago of incarceration. Over 70 base and branch camps sprout up across the landscape, from the piney woods of East Texas to the high plains of the Panhandle. Names like Camp Hearn, Camp Messiah, and Camp Hereford become temporary cities, housing nearly 50,000 German soldiers. Life inside these camps is a surreal inversion of the European war. The United States War Department, operating under the strict supervision of the Provost Marshal General, makes a calculated strategic decision. They will adhere to the 1929 Geneva Convention with fanatical precision. The logic is cool and transactional. By treating German prisoners better than they treat their own civilians in some cases, Washington hopes to secure reciprocal treatment for American boys held in stalags across the Third Reich. The result is what the American press bitterly nicknames the Fritz Ritz. The prisoners live in standardized barracks, heated in the winter and ventilated in the summer. They have access to canteens where they can purchase chocolate, tobacco and, shockingly, beer. The mess halls serve 2,000 calories a day, beef, potatoes, fresh vegetables, and white bread. For men who had spent months scavenging for scraps in the Tunisian desert, this is not imprisonment. It is a gluttonous vacation. They organize soccer leagues, orchestras, and university-level classes taught by former professors within their ranks. At Camp Hearn, the Fritz Circle theatre troupe builds elaborate sets and performs everything from Goethe to Beethoven. They create a little Germany behind the wire, insulated from the war, growing fat and tanned under the Texas sun. But outside the perimeter, a different reality is taking hold. The United States is fully mobilized. Every able-bodied American male is either in the Pacific or preparing to cross the Atlantic. The result is a catastrophic labor vacuum on the home front. Texas, the agricultural engine of the South, is stalling. Cotton is blooming, corn is high, and cattle need tending, but there are no hands to do the work. The crops are threatening to rot in the fields, a disaster that could cripple the Allied food supply. The ranchers and farmers are desperate, petitioning the government for help. The solution is obvious, yet politically explosive. The government authorizes the Prisoner of War Employment Program. The War Department dictates that prisoners can be contracted out to local farms and ranchers, provided they are paid and treated humanely. It is a radical integration. The government is proposing to take trained soldiers of the Wehrmacht, men who were shooting at Americans only months prior, and place them on the family farms of rural Texas. There will be minimal guarding. In many cases, a single farmer or his wife will be responsible for a squad of enemy combatants in the middle of nowhere. The orders come down. The camp commanders begin selecting the most cooperative prisoners, the ones least likely to sabotage the machinery. The trucks line up at the gates of the base camps. The German soldiers climb into the beds, watching the barbed wire recede as they are driven out onto the dirt roads. They are leaving the collective safety of the Golden Cage and heading into the unknown territory of the American frontier, where they will come face to face with a people they were sent to conquer. The initial collision between the Texas ranchers and the German prisoners is defined by a thick, suffocating tension. For years, the ranchers have consumed a steady diet of wartime newsreels and posters depicting the German soldier as a faceless, jack-booted automaton, a Hun incapable of mercy. Now, a government truck is idling in their driveway, depositing a squad of these very men to harvest their cotton and mend their fences. The fear is palpable. Mothers pull their children behind their skirts. Old men, veterans of the First World War who remember the trenches of France, grip the steering wheels of their pickups with white knuckles. They are expecting fanatics who will sabotage their tractors or attack their families the moment the guard looks away. In the small towns of the Panhandle, the arrival of the POWs is treated like the arrival of a dangerous pestilence. The ranchers accept the labor because they have no choice. It is either the Germans or bankruptcy, but they do so with a hand near the shotgun rack. For the prisoners, the culture shock is equally disorienting, but for entirely different reasons. They step off the trucks into a world that feels like a hallucination. Many of these young men grew up in the strict, regimented society of 1930s Germany, where American culture was filtered through the lens of Nazi propaganda. They were told Americans were culturally bankrupt gangsters, a mongrel race with no discipline. Instead, they find themselves face to face with the living embodiment of their childhood fantasies. It is a little-known fact that Germans of this generation were obsessed with the Wild West, devouring the novels of Karl May, a German author who wrote romanticized tales of the American frontier. To a 20-year-old corporal from Hamburg, seeing a Texas rancher in a Stetson hat, boots, and spurs is like meeting a mythical creature. They are also stunned by the sheer material wealth of the decadent Americans. They see farmhands driving their own cars. They see mechanized tractors doing the work of 10 men. They see the ranchers' wives serving portions of meat at lunch that would feed a German family for a week. The lie of German superiority begins to dissolve not through debate, but through the undeniable evidence of their own eyes. The thaw begins in the fields. It starts with the universal language of physical labor. The ranchers expect the prisoners to be lazy or rebellious. Instead, they witness the ingrained discipline of the Wehrmacht. The Germans attack the work with a military precision. They don't just stack hay, they engineer it into perfect geometric blocks. They repair engines with an intuitive mechanical skill that earns the grudging respect of the Texan farmers. A quiet, unspoken respect forms over the hum of threshers and the swinging of scythes. The rancher watches a prisoner sweat through his shirt to save a calf from a bog, or fix a broken axle in the mud. He stops seeing a Nazi and starts seeing a man who knows the value of a hard day's work. The Hun becomes Fritz or Hans. The guard, bored and hot, puts his rifle down against a tree and takes a nap, knowing the prisoners aren't going anywhere. The barbed wire of ideology is cut by the shared reality of the harvest. The regulations from the War Department are explicit. Fraternization is strictly prohibited. Prisoners are to be treated firmly, fed separately, and kept at an emotional distance. But in the isolation of the Texas backcountry, Washington, D.C. feels like a foreign country. The reality of the ranch dictates the rules. Come noon, when the sun is beating down with lethal intensity, the rancher's wife does not send a bucket of slop out to the barn. She sets the table. Initially, it happens with hesitation, a plate offered on the back porch. But soon, the pretext collapses. The German prisoners are invited inside. They sit at the family dinner table, their dusty boots tucked under chairs, passing bowls of mashed potatoes and gravy. In these moments, the war dissolves. A prisoner shows the rancher pictures of his children back in Dresden. The rancher's son, wide-eyed, asks about the tanks in Africa. They listen to the radio together, hearing reports of battles where their countrymen are killing each other. Yet here, they break bread. The Nazi becomes a guest. The enemy becomes a young man who misses his mother. It is a quiet treason of the heart, shared over Sunday roast. Among the prisoners, a hierarchy emerges, not of rank, but of skill. And in Texas, the highest currency is the ability to handle a horse. One prisoner stands out, a man who perhaps rode in the cavalry before the tanks took over, or grew up on a farm in Bavaria. He doesn't just ride, he understands the animal. The rancher, a man who values his livestock more than his own comfort, watches this prisoner work. He sees the gentle hands, the firm seat, the way the stallion calms under the German's touch. A bond forms that bypasses language entirely. It is the bond of horsemen. Eventually, the rancher grants a privilege that technically constitutes a court-martial offence. On Sunday afternoons, when the work is done, he allows the prisoner to take the horses out. Exercise them, he says, a convenient excuse. He saddles his favourite stallion, a powerful, spirited animal that few dare to ride, and hands the reins to the enemy. He watches as the German mounts up and trots out toward the open plains. There is no guard. There is only the trust that one man places in another not to steal his most prized possession. For the prisoner, this is not just a ride, it is a narcotic. For an hour, the barbed wire of the camp, the shame of surrender, and the terror of the war are erased by the wind in his face. He is not a prisoner of war, he is a free man in the saddle. But with the taste of freedom comes a dangerous intoxication. The horizon is wide open, and the border is closer than he thinks. By mid-1944, the atmosphere in the Texas camps undergoes a dark transformation. The relaxed, almost collegiate air of the early days evaporates, replaced by a brooding, suffocating dread. The news from Europe is no longer just battlefield reports, it is a eulogy. The Allies have landed in Normandy. The Soviet steamroller is crushing the Eastern Front. The cities of the fatherland, Hamburg, Berlin, Dresden, are being turned into firestorms by Allied bombers. The letters from home stop coming. When they do arrive, they are heavily redacted by censors or filled with frantic grief. The prisoners are no longer conquering heroes waiting for a negotiated peace. They are men watching their world burn from the other side of the planet. Helplessness breeds desperation. The golden cage begins to feel less like a sanctuary and more like a coffin. For the rider, the Sunday afternoon gallops cease to be a mere escape from boredom. They become a tactical reconnaissance. He begins to study the landscape not with the eyes of a cowboy, but with the cold calculation of a staff sergeant. He marks the position of the sun, the flow of the creeks, and the distant landmarks that align with the crude, hand-drawn maps circulating in the barracks. He knows the geography. South. Just a few hundred miles of hard riding lies the Rio Grande. Mexico. A neutral country. A gateway to South America, and from there, a ship back to Europe. back to the fight, back to the defense of his family. The temptation is a physical ache. Every time he swings into the saddle, he feels the immense power of the stallion beneath him. This animal has the stamina to make the run. The rancher, in his naive American trust, has handed him the vehicle of his liberation. The conflict within him is internal and violent. On one side stands the soldier's code. It is the duty of every prisoner to escape. To sit out the war while his comrades die in the ruins of Germany is cowardice. On the other side is a strange, new morality that has taken root in the Texas soil. The rancher has treated him not as a number, but as a son. He has fed him, protected him from the camp guards, and given him the dignity of the saddle. To steal the horse is to confirm every lie told about the treacherous German. But as the headlines from Europe grow bloodier, the soldier's duty silences his conscience. He begins to hoard supplies. Strips of dried beef stolen from the ranch kitchen, a canteen filled with fresh water, a compass crafted from a magnetized needle and a cork. It is a Sunday in late autumn. The air is crisp, the sky a piercing, unforgiving blue that stretches endlessly over the panhandle. The rancher leads the stallion out. The animal is groomed, his coat gleaming like polished obsidian in the harsh light. The rancher hands over the reins, a casual gesture of routine. He smiles, makes a comment about the cooling weather, completely unaware that he is arming his enemy. The prisoner mounts. He feels the jagged weight of the extra supplies hidden under his tunic. He grips the leather reins, the physical connection to the man he's about to betray. He nods, a stiff, formal gesture that masks his racing heart. He turns the horse toward the open gate. He does not trot today. He spurs the horse immediately, pushing into a canter, heading straight for the tree line that marks the edge of the property. He is not exercising the horse. He is beginning a run for the border. The rancher watches him go, perhaps noticing the unusual urgency, perhaps thinking the boy just needs to burn off the frustration of confinement. He turns back to the barn, the sound of hoofbeats fading into the vast silence of the plains. The gallop is violent, a thundering cadence that vibrates through the prisoner's entire skeleton. For the first 10 minutes, there is no thought, only the visceral, intoxicating rush of speed. The wind tears at his eyes, blurring the mesquite and scrub oak into a streak of green and brown. He pushes the animal hard, driven by the adrenaline of the escape, putting miles between himself and the barbed wire. He clears the first ridge. The ranch house is gone. The camp is gone. There is only the endless, flat expanse of the Llano Estacado, the staked plains, stretching out like an ocean of grass. He is technically a fugitive now. Every step south is a step closer to the Rio Grande, closer to the chaotic freedom of Mexico. He imagines the route, hiding in arroyos by day, moving by stars at night, stealing water from windmills. It is a suicide mission, perhaps, but it is action. It is a soldier's choice. But the horse begins to lather. The prisoner, a horseman before he was a soldier, feels the change in the animal's breathing. Instinct overrides panic. He pulls back on the reins, slowing the stallion from a gallop to a trot, and then to a walk. The silence of the plains rushes back in, absolute and overwhelming. He stops. The only sound is the heavy heaving of the stallion's flanks and the creak of the saddle leather. He looks down at the animal. This is not just transport. This is the rancher's pride. The man had warned his own sons away from this horse, yet he had handed the reins to a German prisoner. He had offered a trust that defied every rule of war. The prisoner looks south. The horizon is a shimmering line of heat, promising a return to the fight, a return to duty. Then he looks at the horse's neck, slick with sweat. To ride to Mexico is to kill this animal. To steal him is to validate every accusation the world has levied against his people, that they are without honor, without soul, capable only of taking. A profound realization washes over him in the heat of the Texas afternoon. He can be an escaped enemy combatant, or he can be a man of honor. He cannot be both. The war in Europe is a clash of ideologies, vast and impersonal. But here, on this dirt patch, the war is small. It is just two men and a horse. And in this moment, the bond of the saddle proves stronger than the oath to the Führer. He sits there for a long time, the shadow of the horse lengthening across the grass. He curses quietly in German, a bitter, resigned sound. Then, with a heaviness that has nothing to do with fatigue, he turns the stallion around. The ride back is slow. The sun is dipping low, painting the sky in violent shades of purple and bruised orange. He rides back toward the captivity he loathes, back to the cage. But he rides with his head up. He has lost his freedom, but he has kept something far more fragile. The sun has touched the horizon when the silhouette reappears. The rancher is standing by the corral gate, smoking a cigarette, his eyes fixed on the tree line. He has been waiting for an hour past the usual time. He has checked his watch a dozen times, the sickening realization settling in his gut that his trust has been weaponized against him. If the prisoner is gone, the rancher faces not only the loss of the horse, but the scrutiny of the FBI and the shame of the community. Then, the sound of hoofbeats. Not the frantic gallop of escape, but the rhythmic, tired walk of a return. The prisoner rides into the yard. He is covered in dust, his face a mask of exhaustion and stoicism. He dismounts without a word. The interaction that follows is brief and devoid of sentimentality. He hands the reins to the rancher. The American takes them, his hand brushing against the leather that is slick with the horse's sweat. He runs a hand over the stallion's neck, feeling the heat, the tremors in the muscles. He knows this horse was not just exercised, he was ridden hard. He looks at the prisoner, measuring the distance in the man's eyes. He understands exactly what happened out there on the plains, the decision to leave and the decision to return. No words are exchanged. There is no thank you, no apology, just a nod. The rancher opens the gate, and the prisoner walks back toward the waiting truck that will take him back to the barbed wire. This moment of almost escape was not unique. Throughout the war, the FBI recorded 2,222 escape attempts by German POWs in the United States. But the geography of America proved to be a more effective guard than any rifle. Those who did run found themselves defeated not by bullets, but by the sheer, crushing vastness of the continent. They wandered into the deserts of Arizona or the forests of Tennessee, only to realize there was nowhere to go. Most were recaptured within days, often walking into local sheriff's offices, asking for water. But in Texas, many didn't run because they simply didn't want to. The honor system held. The bonds formed in the cotton fields and on the backs of horses created a strange paradox. The prisoners were technically enemies of the state, yet they were often treated better by their captors than they had been by their own officers. May 8, 1945. The radio announcements crackle across the Texas plains. The Third Reich has surrendered. The 1,000-year Reich has collapsed in rubble and ash. For the Americans, it is VE Day, a moment of jubilant celebration. For the prisoners in the camps at Herne and Hereford, it is a moment of profound, paralyzing silence. They are no longer soldiers of a belligerent power. They are men without a country. But the gates do not open immediately. The United States faces a critical labour shortage that persists even after the guns fall silent. The government delays repatriation. For another year, the German prisoners remain in Texas, harvesting the 1945 and 1946 crops. But the dynamic has shifted. The hope of victory is gone, replaced by anxiety about what awaits them at home. They see the newsreels of Berlin, skeletons of buildings, starving civilians, a nation carved up by the victors. When the orders finally come in 1946 to ship out, the scene at the train stations is bizarrely emotional. There are no bayonets prodding them forward. Instead, there are handshakes. Ranchers stand on the platforms, handing over envelopes of cash, wages saved for the prisoners, often against regulations. Some farmers weep openly, losing the young men who had become part of their families. The journey back is a descent into hell. They leave the abundance of Texas, where many prisoners had actually gained weight during their captivity, and are shipped to transit camps in France and Britain. There, the golden cage is replaced by the harsh reality of post-war Europe. They are put to work clearing minefields and rebuilding shattered cities, often on starvation rations. The contrast is devastating. In the mud of a French holding camp, the memory of a Texas Sunday, of cold beer and grilled steak, feels like a fever dream. Yet, the connection holds. As the 1940s turn into the 1950s, the post offices of rural Texas begin to see a strange influx of mail. Letters arrive from Hamburg, Munich, and Stuttgart, written in broken English. They are letters of gratitude, but more importantly, they are requests for help. The ranchers respond. In one of the great, undertold stories of the war, Texan families begin shipping crates of food, clothing, and medicine to the men who once harvested their cotton. The enemies are now starving in the ruins of Europe, and the cowboys are keeping them alive. It is the final, undeniable proof that the barbed wire had failed to sever their shared humanity. Decades later, grey-haired men with thick German accents would return to Texas as tourists. They would stand at the gates of the old ranches, knocking on doors to embrace the children of the men who had once held them captive. They did not come back to visit a prison. They came back to visit the only place during the war where they had felt like men. Today, the physical footprint of the Texas prisoner of war camps has largely vanished. The barracks at Camp Hearn have been reclaimed by the forest. The guard towers at Hereford are rotting skeletons in the wind. The barbed wire that once demarcated the boundary between the free world and the Third Reich has long since been rolled up and rusted away. If you drive through the Panhandle now, you will see only the endless, flat horizon and the cattle grazing in the silence. But the legacy of those years survives in the soil of the American West. It is a testament to a strange and hopeful truth about human nature. That hatred is often an abstract construct, one that requires distance to survive. When you place two men in a field, one a cowboy, one a soldier, and give them a shared task, the political indoctrination begins to erode. The enemy ceases to be a monster from a poster and becomes a man who knows how to fix a tractor, or who misses his children, or who knows how to handle a headstrong stallion. The story of the German prisoner who turned back from the border is not just a footnote of World War II. It is a defining image of honour. In the middle of the most brutal conflict in human history, amidst gas chambers and fire bombings, a moment of civilization occurred on the Texas plains. A rancher offered trust when none was owed, and a prisoner returned it when it would have been easier to run. Wars are started by governments, fueled by ideologies, and fought by armies. But they are ended, truly ended, in the quiet moments between individuals. In the end, the barbed wire could contain their bodies, but the open plains revealed their humanity. The guns fell silent in 1945, but for the men who rode the fences together in Texas, the peace had arrived long before the surrender was signed.